Okay, the sales conversation is a complex subject. It's a big part of selling, of course, because this is the actual execution of the conversation between you and a potential customer. This takes lots of different forms, so in no way is this going to be an exhaustive list, but this should be a good overview to some concepts that you should understand during the sales conversation. Remember, according to the pipeline, the sales conversation really starts with your first contact with a customer and ends, even just continues after closure because you're going to be gathering feedback. But that's what we're talking about here, is moving someone down through the pipeline and the conversation that facilitates that action. So remember, the whole point is moving people incrementally down the pipeline. So don't feel like every time you talk to a potential customer you have to close a deal. You don't. The goal is to move them even just a little bit from one level to the next through the pipeline. So let's talk about how to have a good sales conversation, the concept involved, and then we'll give you some definitions of those concepts. First of all, research your audience. A lot of what you talk about and how you talk about it is going to depend on who you're talking to. What kind of products they want, how they're going to use those products, what their background is, how much money they have. All that stuff goes into how you govern the sales conversation. So research your audience as much as possible. Know your audience. Also, ask lots of questions and listen. This is a concept that lots of salespeople don't seem to understand. Don't just talk to your customer and blurt out things about your product as fast as possible. You're going to ask questions and listen to the answers that your customers give you. And what you're going to see as we go through these other concepts is everything else you do is going to be predicated on what your customer is saying to you during the conversation. So the next thing is identify key elements, and you can use sales techniques to do this. There are dozens of sales techniques, things like spin selling and consultative selling. We'll have videos on those techniques. But identify key elements inside of the conversation. During the conversation, what you're really going to want to find out are things like the decision-making unit, who's in charge of making the decision to purchase, who has the budget, is it one person, is it 3 people, is it a committee? You're going to want to find that out. Buying motive, what's the primary problem they're trying to solve? What's their motive for making the purchase? Price sensitivity, are they super cheap, will they spend money? Objections, they'll tell you along the way what their doubts are or what objections they have to the sales process. And then key contact. Who's your person inside the organization that's going to be your go-to person for answers and for continued discussion as you go down through the pipeline. So keep in mind, if you can't answer these questions after most of your sales conversations, you either need to have another conversation or you're not asking the right questions. So make sure that you're working toward finding out concepts like this. The next thing you're going to do is gather feedback. Sorry, that's misspelled, but you're going to gather feedback. This is through conversation, also for nonverbal clues and from analytics. So they're going to tell you stuff. You're going to look at them and you're going to see things like body language and sort of how they treat you. And then also you may use things like Google Analytics in an electronic scenario. You can actually see what people are doing inside of your website. Overcoming objections is another thing that's going to happen during these sales conversations. Often users are going to say, well, I don't want to do this because of XYZ, or I think that it does XYZ, and you're going to need to learn how to overcome objections. We'll have a video on that as well. And you're also going to only close when appropriate. Remember, victory is just a movement from one level to another. It may take dozens of conversations to finish a sale. It may take a year. That's your sales cycle. So you're not always going to be like, do you want to buy it? Do you want to buy it? Do you want to buy it? You don't have to push for a close every time. However, if it's appropriate and you've gone through the entire process, then of course you are going to want to push for a close. So super important is the whole point is always leave with a follow-up action plan. And what that means is have a specific task and ask for permission. So at the end of every conversation, you're going to say, is it okay if I call you again to discuss XYZ? Is it okay if I put this data together and send it over to you that you asked for? Is it okay if I put a contract together and send it to you? You're going to ask for permission around a specific task. Is it okay if I call you again in a week? Most of you probably have this done to you by salespeople. That is the point of the sales conversation. That's the victory marker, is whether or not you have a specific follow-up action. So let's talk about some key concepts here, electronic and personal analytics. Electronic, you're going to use things like Google Analytics. You'll be able to tell a lot about how people are shopping and buying on your site. Personal things like body language, posture, position in the room, slouching, yawning. Are they using their cell phone? Look for those cues to gauge interest. In terms of questions, questions plus listening to the answer equals buying motive and objections. That they're going to tell me what their buying motive are and what their objections are. I just need to ask the right questions. And be prepared. Know answers to common objections ahead of time. Well, I think it's too expensive. Actually, we're less expensive than our competitors. Watch the objections video. It'll help you a lot with that. And then this is a concept that I can't stress enough, communication. This is the reason why most people lose a customer or don't sell a customer. Define your terms. Don't use words that the customer doesn't understand or they don't know what you're talking about. Define the terms that you're using that are unique to your product. Keep it super simple. Use simple sentences. Don't use a whole mess of acronyms that they don't understand. Use pertinent examples. Don't give somebody who is building toys an example from the car industry. Use pertinent examples to their industry or their knowledge level. And ask questions to gauge understanding. Finish the conversation by saying, does that make sense? Do you understand that? And make sure they respond to you and that you know that they do understand. So this is a big concept, the sales conversation, but the point is, incremental moves down the pipeline, figure out who the decision-making unit is, buying motive, price sensitivity, objections, key contacts. You're going to want to figure that stuff out. Watch for nonverbal cues in conversation and always leave with an action plan and a specific follow-up.